we give Ohio State a lot of credit by saying, man, if they play their best, nobody can beat them. Greg, I think the team that can possibly give them a run, if they play their best, is Texas.
Hello and welcome in. It's always college football, and we appreciate you being here. We are just a couple days away from the college football playoff semifinals getting started in Miami, Florida. I'm your host, Greg McElroy. We got a great show for you today. We're going to break down those semifinal matchups. We'll break down the Orange Bowl. We'll break down the Cotton Bowl. We'll go deeper than anybody. We'll answer all the biggest questions, and we'll preview some of the biggest matchups. But what we'll also do is we'll visit with Booger McFarland of ESPN and ABC at the end of the show to help further break down some of these games and the things and the storylines that we are clinging to. We always ask you if you could like, rate, and subscribe to the show. It means a lot to us when you do that. We had millions upon millions of views in 2024, more views than we could have ever imagined, more podcast downloads than we could have ever imagined as well. So we cannot tell you how much we appreciate the support that you've shown the show here throughout the last calendar year. 2025 is going to be even better. We definitely feel like we are on the upward ascent, just like college football. We are on the cusp of something super special. And to crown a 12-team playoff national champ is going to be awesome here in the next couple weeks. But like, rate, subscribe to the show. Tell your friends we don't have some massive marketing budget. We don't have a presented by sponsor. We just are in it for organic growth, and we're in it here to serve the sports fan. So for all of us here at Always College Football, we appreciate you. But let's kick things off with a slightly bigger picture dive into the first two rounds of the playoff before we break down these matchups. Okay, diving into some of these games, and we have a few big picture items that we want to address before we dive into these individual matchups and how we kind of see this whole thing shaking out. Let's just first, before we dive into the games, look at the first two rounds of the college football playoff, okay? Couple of obvious takeaways. And I'm not saying we're going to solve these problems today. We're not. I'm just bringing to your attention so when we revisit these a little bit later down the road, you'll know that it's front of mind for me. Teams with a bye went 0-4 in the quarterfinals, okay? Conference champions overall are a combined 0-5 in the playoffs this season. The average margin of victory in the first round of the quarterfinals is about 17 points, 16.9 to be exact. 7 of the 8 playoff games so far have been decided by at least 10 points. The one that wasn't was Arizona State and Texas that, of course, went to overtime. And through 8 college football playoff games this season, every game has seen a team lead by at least 16 points at some point. So, bigger picture, the playoffs, as far as viewership is concerned, off the charts good, resoundingly successful. As far as excitement, interest level, through the roof. As far as entertainment value, I personally have found the games to be very entertaining. But as far as competitiveness, not so much. Not the end of the world. Doesn't mean the committee got it wrong. Not trying to make this into some big grandstanding, anything like that. I'm not suggesting it. I just think there's going to be tweaks that we are going to talk about on this show and others, that the college football playoff format is kind of an evolving landscape. And what we've gotten so far has been, I think, pretty good. Not the most competitive, but what is the main goal of the college football playoff? People always wondered this. What is the main goal? To crown a worthy champion. Right? That's the main goal. And so far, the 4 teams that are left in the event in which they win the Natty will all be deserving, will all be worthy of bringing back that beautiful golden trophy, right? A couple other big picture things. All Big Ten final. Now, 2 of the 4 teams remaining are from the Big Ten, and they're on opposite sides of the bracket, obviously. Ohio State on one side, on the high side, Penn State on the low side. Now, there's never been a national championship game in the BCS or the college football playoff era between teams from the Big Ten. That's dating all the way back to 1998. So 26 years or so, we've never seen an all Big Ten championship game. We've seen it from the SEC a handful of times, but never in the Big Ten. And Michigan, they naturally won the national championship last year. Well, the Big Ten has not won consecutive national championships since 1940 through 1942, when Minnesota won back-to-back titles and Ohio State made it 3 straight for the conference by winning it in 42. So we have not seen Big Ten dominance at the top of the sport in quite a while, okay? And with all the conference champions eliminated, the national championship will be awarded to either an independent, that would be Notre Dame, or a team that failed to win their conference, Texas, Ohio State, Penn State. And little perspective on that, the last independent to win the national championship was Miami back in 1989. That was 1 year after another independent, Notre Dame, won the title there in 88 behind Lou Holtz. So we haven't had independents win it in the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and so far throughout the 2020s. In the AP poll era, that dates back to 1936, there have been 4 instances of a team that was a member of a conference that won the national championship, but not the conference championship. And 3 of those 4 came in the last 14 years. Alabama won it in 2011. They didn't win their conference. LSU won their conference, but Alabama got revenge in the Natty. In 2017, Alabama did not make the SEC title game, but made the playoff and then beat Georgia in overtime. And then in 2021, Georgia beat Alabama, avenging their SEC championship game loss. So we've seen it 3 times in the modern era. And then who can forget that team back in 1936, the Minnesota Golden Gophers, that did not win their conference, but they did win the national championship, okay? A little bit of historical significance with what we have to look forward to here in the semifinals. A couple of breakdowns here. Very excited about the teams that are involved here in the college football playoff semifinals, okay? The semifinals, they'll feature 4 of the top programs in college football history when it comes to total wins. Ohio State is second. Texas and Notre Dame are both tied at 4th, and Penn State is 7th. They all rank in the top 7 in total wins. So that's really exciting. 4 blue bloods with historical significance, all with the chance to win the national championship. All 4 teams also rank in the top 7 in scoring defense this year. Notre Dame, they allow 13.6 points per game. That's second. Penn State at 15.7 or 15.8. That's 8th. They're 7th, excuse me. So the others all right around there. So it's pretty amazing that maybe it is a return of defense at the top of college football. Fascinating things to consider because so much attention the last few years have been obviously paid to the offensive side of the football, understandably so. Offense has been very entertaining, and for the most part in the college football playoff era, you kind of had to score points to win. Maybe not this year. Maybe it's defense that is returning to the forefront of championship caliber play. Notre Dame and Penn State will get things kicked off. This will be 7:30 Eastern time on ESPN. This game will be Thursday. Very much looking forward to being on the call alongside Sean McDonough, Molly McGrath, and Katie George. This will be awesome. We hope that you'll tune in. It'll be live from Miami at 7:30. Notre Dame, about a 2-point favorite right now. The total somewhere around 45 or 46. Both Notre Dame and Penn State have 13 wins this year. That's the first time in their respective program histories. Each are looking for their first national championship since the 1980s. Notre Dame won it in 88, like I referenced earlier. Penn State won it a couple years before that. That was in 1986. Notre Dame and Penn State are both making their 6th appearance in the Orange Bowl. Notre Dame last made it to the Orange Bowl in 1996, where they lost to Florida State 31-26. That was the 95 season, 96 Orange Bowl. And then Penn State, they made it in 2006. That was the 2005 season, and they beat Florida State in that matchup. Okay, should be awesome. Notre Dame, we'll start with them. Notre Dame has won 12 straight games overall. They fell to Northern Illinois, but they currently hold the longest active win streak in the FBS. What's amazing is that 9 consecutive games have been won by at least 10 points. That's their longest streak since 1949, when Frank Leahy won his 4th and final national championship with the program. Okay, Penn State's had a number of superlatives as well. A lot to be proud about if you're a Penn State fan. They made quick work of both Boise State and SMU en route to this first trip to the Final Four here in the college football playoff, in their first Final Four and their first college football playoff appearance. They're trying to become the first team since 2019 LSU to make the playoff for the first time and go on to win the Natty. Will be awesome to see. We'll see whether or not they can get it done. Question number one in this game, and if you're new to us here at Always College Football, we always ask a series of questions. These questions basically determine whether or not we think it's going to go a certain way. I'm on the call, so I won't make a pick for this game, but you can answer these questions yourself, like this one. Can Notre Dame continue to run the football? All right. If the answer is yes, that goes a long way towards helping Notre Dame win the championship, right? Win the game in this scenario. But we'll ask a series of questions, and we have a bunch for these two matchups. We've had a lot of time, and we're going to dive in as deep as we possibly can. Question number one, can Notre Dame continue to run the football? Notre Dame won the Sugar Bowl despite gaining only 244 total yards. Now, we know that Notre Dame is a rushing attack. That's how they approach it. That's how they attack it. They pride themselves on being one of the best in the country and controlling the line of scrimmage and hitting you with a lot of different pieces in the run game. It's not just a 1-2 punch at running back. They also involve their quarterback, Riley Leonard. But against Georgia, they didn't have the dominant rushing yardage that they typically have. Now, they were still relatively effective. They didn't have a ton of negative yards. They didn't have a lot of lost yardage plays, but they also didn't create a lot of big plays and big explosives on the ground either. They had 154 rushing yards. That was their third fewest of the season. They averaged 4.2 yards per carry. That was their second worst output of the season. They had 0 rushing touchdowns, which is their fewest, obviously. And they only had 3 10-plus yard runs. That was their fewest as well. And all 3 of those 10-yard runs against Georgia came at the hands of Riley Leonard, who did have 7 first downs in the process running the football, but the passing game for him wasn't great, so we kind of had to do it all with his legs. Now, Jeremiah Love has been their best back all season long, super explosive. Going into the game against Georgia, he had found the end zone 13 consecutive games. He didn't. So that streak is now ended. And to make matters worse, he had just 7 touches. That was season low. He had just 21 scrimmage yards. So we'll see. Going into that game, he had 4 straight games where he went for over 125. Is that knee injury that had given him trouble a little bit against USC, forced him to leave the game early, lingering effects against Indiana, and ultimately against Georgia? Will he be at 100% for this matchup, or will he have to operate at less than 100%? Jadarian Price, in the event in which Love is not at 100%, he'll get a lion's share of the carries. He's an excellent back in his own right. He's the best back in country as far as yards after contact per carry, and he's excellent on the perimeter. So if this game becomes a game where you want some speed on the perimeter, Jadarian Price can deliver that. Now, Penn State's got to tackle really, really well. They did a great job against Boise State because this Notre Dame team, headlined by Jadarian Price, they average about 4 yards after contact per carry. That's the second best in the country, behind Penn State's last opponent, that was Boise State. So Penn State's been really, really good. They've done great in yards per rush, rushing yards per game, rushing touchdowns, and is coming off a dominant performance holding and containing Ashton Jeanty to a season-low 104 rushing yards. But this will be really important. Will they be able to stack the box the same way they did against Boise and find success? Can they do that against Notre Dame? We will find out. Question number 2, can Penn State continue to utilize the perimeter run? Now, since the Ohio State game, you have seen from Penn State's offensive staff, and in particular their offensive coordinator, Andy Kotelnicki, really lean into creating numbers and advantages by running the ball outside the tackles on the perimeter. Nearly half of their rushing attempts this year come outside the tackles. That's among the highest rates in the FBS. They have 51 carries of 10-plus yards outside the tackles. That's in the top 7 in the country. And they have over 1,700 yards outside the tackles. That's in the top 6 in the country. So you've seen a really strong commitment from Penn State to not just emphasize perimeter runs, but also emphasize multiple tight end formations and creating extra gaps for the defense to get their excellent tandem of running backs on the perimeter. Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton are excellent. They do a great job. And they're really comfortable running stretch zone and really comfortable getting on the edge defensively or offensively. Question number 3, will Notre Dame's pressure create problems up front for Penn State? Now, Penn State's a little bit vulnerable in pass protection. Now, Notre Dame has had some challenges as far as their injuries are concerned. They're without Riley Mills, an outstanding and dominant defensive tackle who missed the game against Georgia after getting injured against Indiana, but they're also without two guys on the edges of the defense that could be really impactful as well. So what Notre Dame's had to do as a result, they've had to get a little bit more aggressive. See a little bit more blitz against Georgia. They blitzed about half of the dropbacks that their quarterback dropped back. That's their highest blitz percentage on the season for Al Golden, the defensive coordinator. They also knew that they would probably have to create some athletic advantages. They have Howard Cross, who's a little bit undersized at about 285 pounds. They have Donovan Heinisch, who's about 280 pounds. Those are their defensive tackles. They're not huge, but they're really athletic and they're really disruptive. Can that create some problems for Penn State along the offensive line? Irish finished that game against Georgia with 4 sacks. That's their second most in the game this season. They had 8 against Florida State. So to think they're without a few of their most disruptive weapons, and yet it did not affect their production. Their linebacker stepped up, their defensive line stepped up, and they made a ton of plays. Can they do so again against Penn State? Question number 4. Will Notre Dame be forced to throw the ball downfield? Now, Riley Leonard, their quarterback, is not a guy that's going to be just taking shot after shot after shot over and over and over again downfield. His average depth of target is under 7 yards, which is around 111th in the country as far as how often he's taking chances on the downfield throws. Now, he's got good weapons. I actually am pretty impressed with what I've seen from the growth and development of this Notre Dame wide receiver core. I think Jordan Faison has come on in a big way. He's got a lot of speed. Bo Collins has been very steady. He's a big physical receiver. Most of his work is done underneath, but he can get behind the defense, has a couple of deep ball touchdowns this year. And then Mitchell Evans, their tight end, who's come on really strong down the stretch as he's gotten a little healthier, getting further and further removed from that knee injury. Now, Penn State's going to play a lot of man coverage. That's what they do. Penn State is not a defense that's going to do a ridiculous amount of disguises in their coverage. You kind of, what you see is what you get. I know I got to win matchups. I know I got to win one-on-ones. And if you look at Penn State, a lot of the opponents that they've played against have not really been capable of taking advantage of some downfield throws. Opposing quarterbacks are averaging just 6.5 air yards per attempt downfield against Penn State. That's the shortest distance in the FBS by opposing quarterbacks. So teams are not taking chances. Teams have not tried. Will Notre Dame have to create some big plays offensively? That'll be a big question in the game. Question number 5. Can Notre Dame's man defense contain Penn State's weapons? Now, it's pretty much all about stopping Tyler Warren. When you think about the receiver core and the weapons that Penn State has on the perimeter, like Tyler Warren's just absolutely ridiculous. And the wide receivers for Penn State account for just about 1/3 of the targets. It's not some ridiculous number. They're among the lowest utilized wide receivers in college football. But when you look at Tyler Warren and all the productivity that he has this year, the guy's got like 98 catches, 1,100 yards. He's ridiculous, okay? So couple the fact that these wide receivers are going to be working against excellent corners, Leonard Moore and Christian Gray on one side or the other. These are really, really good guys. And while people have looked at Christian Gray and said, okay, Christian Gray has been targeted and teams have tried to be aggressive in his direction, the results have been somewhat mixed. Some teams have had great success, like USC did. Some teams haven't had so much success because Christian Gray was up to the test. They're going to go after him. But Leonard Moore on the other side, the true freshman, he's been completely locked down all year. So it probably means your external wide receivers, the guys on the outside, they're not going to be super impactful in this game. So Tyler Warren's going to have to win some one-on-one matchups. And who doesn't want to watch the John Mackey Award winner that goes to the best tight end against an All-American safety in Xavier Watts and Adon Schuler, who's one of the best cover safeties in the country. Those two guys will probably switch off responsibilities from time to time, but more often than not, they're going to draw a very, very heavy lift. That's covering Tyler Warren in one-on-one. And both those guys, super, super athletic. Will they be up to the task? And then finally, when you look at just the ridiculous productivity we've seen from Tyler Warren this year at tight end, it's unbelievable. And the guy is absolutely incredible. So just keep in mind, this is a guy that's got 5 receiving touchdowns, 4 rushing touchdowns, a passing touchdown. You name it, this guy's done it on the football field this year. He's been outstanding. And if you can somewhat limit his productivity, you have a chance to slow down this passing attack. Now, it's not easy, but it is the all points bulletin when trying to defend Penn State. The other guy you got to be really mindful of is Amari Evans. He's got great speed over the top. He's number 5. He always seems to get behind the defense. It doesn't matter how far off they're playing. He's going to climb. He's going to get behind him, and you're going to be able to create big plays because of the perimeter rushing attack and the play action passing attack that has now improved drastically for this Penn State offense. Question number 6. Will Abdul Carter be able to go? And if he can't, what does that mean for Penn State's pass rush? Now, the Nittany Lions pressure quarterbacks on about 41% of the opposing quarterbacks' dropbacks. That's about, top 15, top 16 in the country. Right? But the most dynamic player by a pretty considerable margin on Penn State's defense is Abdul Carter. He's probably going to be a top 5 pick, top 10 pick, plays multiple spots on the defense. He's played off the ball. He's now moved up to the end man on the line of scrimmage, but they'll move him around. They'll find matchups for him, and they'll find opportunities for him to create looks against the opposing offense. The guy's got nearly 40 career tackles for loss. He's got 22 career sacks and has forced 5 career fumbles. According to James Franklin, Abdul Carter has a, quote, great mentality. I don't know what that means, because mentality is one thing, but can he physically go? It's a left shoulder injury. The doctors were looking at it. We don't know what part of the body it is. We know it's left arm, left shoulder, left elbow, whatever it may be. Just all I know is that he went out in the second quarter against Boise and was unable to return. So at this point, it does appear like that's going to be a game time decision. But if he can go, that would be massive, because he has led the defense this year with 11 sacks and 21 and a half tackles for loss. So we'll see. If he can't go, that means Deni Dennis Sutton is another key piece. He wears number 33. He's also had a career season, 6.5 sacks, not nearly as productive as Abdul Carter, but of late he's been pretty good. He's got 2.5 sacks in the playoff by itself, including 1.5 against SMU. You also are going to have to keep an eye on Max Granville, who is probably going to fill the void of Carter's third down specific role. He was originally part of the 2025 recruiting class, but reclassified. And he played just 11 snaps against Boise State, but could be a guy that sees his productivity increase. And then Amib Vanover, who is number 15, who has great length at the position as well. So we'll be they're very deep on the edges of the defense. So if Abdul Carter can't go, it's not a deal breaker, but obviously his impact and his presence will always be felt when he's on the field. So hopefully for Penn State, he'll be good to go. Question number 7. Who will win the turnover battle? Notre Dame leads the FBS with 31 takeaways this season. Those takeaways have led to an FBS leading 148 points off of turnovers. All right, the only game this year where the Fighting Irish did not record a takeaway and did not win the turnover differential was when they lost to Northern Illinois. That was week 2. They were -2 in the turnover margin that day, and they did not record a takeaway. So turnovers have been very impactful for Notre Dame. And you think about just in this playoff run by itself, okay? First game against Indiana. Indiana's got the ball in the red zone. Missed throw by Rourke. Interception by Xavier Watts. One play later, 98 yards out the gate by Jeremiah Love. Think back to the game against Georgia. End of half situation. Gunnar Stockton drops back. RJ Oben strips it. It's recovered by Tui Alamaka. One play later, touchdown, Notre Dame to Bo Collins in the end zone. So they've done a great job of being opportunistic, but also paying off those short field opportunities as well. And then for Penn State, they forced 7 turnovers in their last 2 games. They got 3 against SMU, 4 against Boise State, including a couple pick sixes against the Mustangs in Happy Valley. So with these 2 teams, knowing these 2 teams, it's highly likely that a turnover could certainly shift things into that team's favor. So a big mistake is something that you absolutely have to avoid. And like I said, I will not make a call in this game, but we hope that you'll tune in 7:30 Eastern time on ESPN. For Sean McDonough, myself, Molly McGrath, and Katie George, who will have the call. Ohio State and Texas. Ohio State is about a 6-point favorite. This game will be played in Dallas, Texas, but Buckeyes are everywhere. even the other Jack lives in Dallas. So if you think that Texas, because it's just 3 hours from Austin, is going to have this massive advantage in the stands, think again. Buckeye fans will be there, and they will be well represented. Like I said, about a 6-point favorite for Ohio State at this point. Who can blame them with how they've performed throughout the course of the last 2 games? This game will be 7:30 Eastern time on Friday. Looking forward to seeing it, that's for sure. We'll start with Ohio State. They're the favorite. They are currently sitting there in a position where no one's playing better football than them. If you look at how they've played since that loss to Michigan, tell me who's looked more complete. Tell me who's looked more dominant. Another thing, too, things have been pretty good for Ohio State at AT&T Stadium. That stadium was built in 2009. They are 3-1 all time, which includes the national championship that they won in 2015. That's the 2014 season, 2015 year. That was over Oregon. They also beat SC in the 17 Cotton Bowl. They beat TCU in a 2015 regular season game. And then last year, they lost to Missouri in the season ender. That was against like I said, Missouri in the Cotton Bowl last year. How did Ohio State get here? Okay, they, of course, cruised to a 41-21 win against Oregon. They were up 34-0 in the blink of an eye, and it was the largest lead by any team against an AP number 1 team since Alabama over Notre Dame in the 2013 BCS National Championship game. So we have not seen a number 1 team that got into that much of a hole in more than a decade. Ohio State just did it against a team that was unblemished throughout the regular season and was really, really good in the process. So just goes to show you how historically great that performance and that start was for the Buckeyes last time around. Let's go with next to Texas. Their 23rd appearance in the Cotton Bowl. They're 11-10-1. They have the most Cotton Bowl appearances of any team. Their 11 wins are more than double the next closest team, which is, I think, is pretty amazing. Bama, A&M, and Notre Dame each have 5 Cotton Bowl victories. Texas has 11. Now, how did Texas get here? They were up by as many as 16 points in the fourth quarter, and the Sun Devils stormed all the way back, forced overtime. Texas had a chance to win it in regulation, not once, but twice, but Bert Auburn misses 2 go-ahead field goals there in the fourth quarter. Now, Texas goes into overtime. They survive. They win at 39-31. I would say it was a classic. I think that's a fair word to use in what was the 4th college football playoff game to go to overtime, just the 2nd to go to multiple overtimes. That was the 2018 Rose Bowl between Georgia and Oklahoma that also went to double overtime. So should be an awesome game. Can't wait to see it. Let's see what's going to determine who wins it, huh? Let's go to question number 1. Can Ohio State start fast again? I referenced a moment ago just how ridiculous that start was. Now, what's amazing about what Ohio State has done in the last couple weeks is that if you look at their first quarter performance, really this season has been, for the most part, decent, okay? Usually they start pretty strong in the passing game. They lead the country in first quarter completion percentage. They rank in the top 10 in yards per attempt and QBR. So that was just season long. But if you look at what they've accomplished just in the first quarter of the 2 college football playoff games that they've played in, it takes it to a whole new level. They had 205 yards in the first quarter against Tennessee. They thought, you know what, that's pretty good. That's our best performance in more than a calendar year. They had 210 against Indiana in 2022, and that was the Indiana team before Kurt Cignetti got there. So 210 against Indiana. Yeah, that was a 3-9 football team. No surprise. 205 against Tennessee. All right, fine. They took advantage of maybe a slightly overrated Tennessee team, perhaps. And then you go and you play against a team that is 12-0 and has really dominated the vast majority of the season. And they go on to put up 233 first quarter yards, including 212 through the air. So pretty ridiculous to break their own record in consecutive weeks, and to do so against the AP number 1 ranked team makes it all the more ridiculous. Can they start that fast again? Because if they can, look out. Because if you're playing from behind against this group, you're in for a very, very long day. Question number 2. Can Texas effectively run the football? Like Trey Wisner, Jaden Blue, we know what this team is all about. We know what this team evolved into. They're a group that wants to be balanced. I know we spend so much time talking about the weapons. We spend so much time talking about the quarterback play, Quinn Ewers, the offensive line, the defensive front, the quarters, coverage that they'll play. it's really coming down to, can they run the football? And the 2 games that they didn't run the ball very well, it did not end well for them. Trey Wisner and Jaden Blue, they're going to have to get theirs. They're going to have to get touches. They're going to have to manufacture opportunities to have maybe extended handoffs. It might go down in the box score as a reception, but it's no different than a toss sweep. Because if you think you're just going to run it right up the gut against Ohio State, I think you got another thing coming. This defense has been too good in the front 7. They're too stout. They're too physical to anticipate Texas's offensive line just flat out moving them off the football. It's not going to happen. They're going to have to get by with a little bit of misdirection. They're going to have to utilize a few smoke and mirrors to create some seams in the run game, but they have to stay committed to it, because if you become one-dimensional against this Ohio State team, that is a recipe for disaster. Question number 3, can Will Howard stay hot? Now, outside the performance against Michigan, when he just wasn't seeing the field, he really hasn't had a lot of situations in which he's been putting the ball in harm's way. Yeah, I know he had an interception against Tennessee, but if you watch that play, it should have been defensive pass interference because the ball was perfectly thrown. It was right on the face mask. It could not have been better. Now, the Penn State game, he had a fumble over the pylon, sure, but outside of that, he's been super smart with the football. He's also been incredible on downfield throws. He's 3rd in completion percentage right now on downfield throws, and against Tennessee, he had one of the best games of his career on throws that traveled 15 or more yards downfield. He was 7 of 8 on throws that traveled 15 or more. That's the most completions and the best completion percentage he's ever had on throws in the game like that. Okay, 98.8 total QBR, really amazing. Okay, so we know that it picked up right where it left off because he got even more accurate. He didn't have a ball hit the ground on 20+ yard throws against Oregon. And we're not talking about like guys right wide open, guy slows down, just get it to him, allow him to catch it. No, we're talking pinpoint accuracy where the receiver doesn't break stride. And if it is well covered, it doesn't matter. Because when the ball is placed that perfectly, the defender can't be right. Very difficult spot to be in if you're a defender playing against a quarterback that's this hot and this confident. So can Will Howard's success continue? One would assume it likely will. Question number 4, can Quinn Ewers pick up where he left off? Now remember, his career started at Ohio State. This will be the first time a starting quarterback faces his former school in a college football playoff game. But if you look at his performance against Arizona State, it was okay. Started the game with a bang, had a couple of big plays early on, and then kind of went into a little bit of a lull. And then in the 4th quarter and overtime, he kind of awoken. All right. In the 4th quarter, he threw for 197 yards. That's the 2nd highest total in his career. The most he actually had was against Washington last year in the semifinal. He also accounted for 3 touchdowns, including 1 rushing. He did have an interception on what I think was a bad decision. He got overly aggressive, threw a ball that was a little bit too much air under it, and allowed a defender to go and make a play on it. So it was not a flawless 4th quarter, but I do think at the end of the game, had he not played as well as he'd played, Texas probably not in this position to play Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. He played really well down the stretch and gave them plenty of opportunities, not just to win the game in regulation, but to secure it in overtime as well. Question number 5, how will Texas handle Jeremiah Smith? This might be the biggest question of the game, especially taking into account how good Jeremiah Smith has gotten and how good this passing attack has become. Now, Jeremiah Smith is 6'3", 215 pounds. He's likely going to be going against on multiple different occasions. It's not going to be all the time because Texas is not a team that just lines up in man coverage and says, you got him, you got him, you got him, you got him. But we could have one of the better matchups on the perimeter that we'll have all bowl season. That's Jeremiah Smith against Jahdae Barron, who's 5'11", 200. He won the Thorpe Award and has always seemingly stepped up and made a play for Texas when it had to be made. Here's the tough thing about Jeremiah Smith, though, is that he is not a stationary target. They've now started to find some success moving him around. Against Tennessee, for example, he played 15 snaps in the slot. He played a few more snaps in the slot against Oregon. They can move him around. They can put him in the slot. They can motion guys inside and out. So he's going to get some favorable matchups, and it's going to be tough to find him, and you better locate him every single time because he's fresh off a season high and career high 187 yards and 2 touchdowns against Oregon. So he can take over the game, has proven that, and could very easily do it again if you can find some favorable matchups for him in the passing game. Question 6, can the improved Buckeye offensive line handle the Texas defensive front? Now, here's a part of the game that I don't think is being talked about enough. Now, Ohio State, everyone acknowledges this. The coaches acknowledge this. The fans acknowledge this. It is what it is. They got their tail kicked against Michigan, right? Like the offensive line got pushed around, did not play well up front along either line of scrimmage. They were just okay against Oregon. Now you look at the numbers and you look at the performance and you look at the stats and you look at the dominance. You sit there and think, well, the protection must have been good. Oh, well, the offensive line must have played great. That wasn't really the case. The offensive line was okay. They were fine. They just weren't great. The ball was getting out so quickly that it didn't matter. Now, against Tennessee, I thought they were at their best. Now, part of what helped this offensive line is that Chip Kelly, he moved the pocket, he rolled the quarterback out, he changed the launch point, so those pass rushers, they didn't always know exactly where to go. So he kept them guessing and kept them a little bit off balance with how they adjusted things within their protections. But I think this might be the deepest group that Ohio State has faced this year. Now, I don't know if the starters across the board are quite as good as the talent that Michigan has. I mean, Michigan's got a couple guys that are just flat out ridiculous, but Michigan lacks the depth that Texas has. I do think Ohio State, like I said, can neutralize this matchup a little bit if the ball continues to come out really quickly and if they can mix in some run and they can avoid obvious passing rushing situations. But this is a very deep and disruptive group. On the interior, you got Vernon Broughton, Alfred Collins, a handful of other guys that are built to stop the run, guys that are built to stop the pass. They are very deep and they are very versatile along the front on the interior. It's the edges, though, that can be very challenging when playing against this Texas team. Colin Simmons, it's not often when he's the second best freshman on the field. Of course, the best being Jeremiah Smith, but Colin Simmons will be right there. He can take over the game off the edge. Trey Moore, also very twitchy off the edge as well. And then Barron Sorrell, who's got not just some twitch, but he can go speed to power. It can make life difficult on these tackles as well. So can the Buckeye offensive line handle what I think is one of the best defensive lines in college football? Question number 7, can Texas's offensive line handle the pressure that they're going to get from Ohio State's defensive front? Now, Texas's offensive line's been banged up the last couple of weeks. Their right tackle, Cameron Williams, he's got a knee sprain, missed the Arizona State game. Trevor Gooseby started in his place. Gooseby actually played extended minutes on the left side when Kelvin Banks, the left tackle, got banged up against Texas A&M. Long story short, this offensive line has had some challenges. Guys have been a little banged up from time to time. And now you're going to try to find yourself against a defensive front in Ohio State that has taken it to the next level. It's been honest, and I think I've been pretty fair in documenting that this Ohio State defensive line, they have always been a group that could evoke some fear, but the production was not always as good as what I thought it could be. Like I've always watched them, and I always came away from watching Ohio State for a long time thinking, man, I just wish I got a little bit more from that group. That has not been the case the last couple of weeks. I feel like we are finally seeing a group that is reaching its potential, and that's really exciting if you're a fan of college football and have followed them for the last few years. And then finally, question number 8, can Ohio State's rushing attack continue to create balance? Now, Ohio State, I know a lot's been made of Will Howard's progress, the passing game's progress, still a team that wants to pound you, still a team that wants to create opportunities in the run game. Chip Kelly does the best job, or among the best jobs in the sport, at creating opportunities in the run game by marrying up parts of his scheme to the passing attack, taking advantage of tendency breakers, finding ways to split the defense in half. He does an amazing job. There's a reason why they have 12 touchdowns in the last 6 games. The one game they didn't find the end zone on the ground, that was against Michigan. So you know TreVeyon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins are going to get theirs. They're going to get opportunities. It's just, can Texas stop the run without contributing more defenders into the box defensively? Because that's where Chip Kelly and company will get you. They want you to bring that safety down because now they have one-on-ones on the outside with their outstanding wide receivers. But if they can stop the run by keeping their 2 safeties back, that will go a long way in helping Texas defend the whole field, which is what Chip Kelly is ultimately going to force you to do. As far as picks in this game, it's going to be tough. I think this game could go down to the wire. I think it's going to be a little bit lower scoring than people realize. I think both defenses will play better than people realize, but I'm taking Ohio State. However, I don't think Ohio State runs them out of the gym. I think this one comes down to the wire. And if you're thinking about it from that perspective, probably take the points. I think Texas is being a little undervalued. And I think everybody and their brother seems to think that Ohio State's just going to run away with this thing. I think they'll win it. I think it'll be a tight one there in Dallas. Well, he's one of the best analysts around, not just college football, but the NFL as well. You can always check him out with Boomer on the Sunday show. What is that thing called again? Prime time.
NFL prime time. You know what it's called, baby.
I don't feel like I ever say it appropriately, but he's Booger McFarland. Does an amazing job at studio alongside Kevin Nagandi every single week on ABC. Boog, a lot of people are kind of dancing on the SEC's grave right now. To be honest with you, I wasn't that keen on it. I've kind of been just studying the matchups and studying the games, but it sounds like people are really celebrating the fact that the SEC has just one team left, even though they have one team most years when there's just 4 remaining. And yet they still could very easily win the national championship if Texas somehow gets hot. So what do you make of people's reaction to the SEC the last couple of weeks?
Well, I just think it shows you that the history of dominance of the SEC has kind of gotten to people, and people may have expected with this new 12-team playoff and expanded deal that the SEC would get more teams in, which would mean more dominance. And so I think you can attribute that just to the history of the conference and how dominant the conference has been. And I think, let's be honest, I think some people are kind of happy to see uh, what happened to Georgia. Kind of see Georgia get hit in the mouth a little bit, and I think that more times than not, since this whole NIL and transfer portal thing has become prevalent, that parity is creeping into college football. And so, even though Texas has a great opportunity, I think, to win a national championship because they are one of 4 teams left, there's going to be a lot more inclusion. From other conferences, as this whole little era with the 12-team playoff and NIL and transfer portal has kind of gotten to a point where we are now.
Looking at Ohio State, I picked them to win the national championship in the preseason. Can't say this is at all surprising, to be honest with you, to see him play in this way. Just curious why we didn't get it earlier in the season. What do you think has changed for Ohio State these last couple of weeks to now see them playing at a level that really we haven't quite seen in a long time?
Well, I think you can attribute it to 2 things. One, if you look at who their play caller is, Chip Kelly. Chip has always been, at least in my opinion, you can tell me if you agree or disagree. Chip has always been a run guy. Like, even if you go back to the days at Oregon, yeah, they threw the football, but it was a run-based offense. And so now Chip comes to Ohio State, and he's got Travion Henderson, and then they're running the football. You get Quinshawn Judkins, and now it's going to be even more run. And I think Ohio State fell into this trap of, yeah, even though we have Ibuka, even though we have Tate, and we got this unicorn in Jeremiah Smith, we're still going to run the football. And I think at a certain point during the season, um, somebody got to Chip and they said, "Hey, throw the football to 4." Like, it's not hard. Throw it to 4, run your offense through that. I get it. You want to run the football, and we spent $1.5 million or whatever the number is on Judkins from Ole Miss. Doesn't matter. Throw the football. And we've seen this evolution, McElroy, from Chip Kelly being a run-centric coordinator to they throw the football all over the lot right now. And it's much easier to get explosive plays in the passing game than it is in the run game. Think about it. The run game, you got to get sometimes 9, 10 guys on the same page to create an explosive run. In the pass game, it's one-on-one. Yeah, you got to block them up front, but it's usually one-on-one or one-on-two. And if you make a guy miss, you can score a touchdown. And so I think Chip has figured out that his best player is number 4, and his best position group is the wide receiver group, and they're getting the football to them. It took a little while, but we're here now.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. The other thing that's been different about watching Ohio State, I don't know how you felt about them. I've watched that defensive line for a long time, years, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years. I've watched them. I've always felt, man, I wish I got more from that group. Like, I'd see glimpses, I'd see flashes, but I didn't often see down in, down out dominance like we've seen the last couple of weeks. And I don't know what's changed. Like, what the heck happened? Why is it different now? Like, you played D-line. Why is it that that group went from being, I don't want to call them underwhelming because that seems a little unfair, but why now all of a sudden did they go from being a slight underachieving group to now a completely dominant group that no one can block?
So I think, usually every position group, in my opinion, is led by the best players. And if the best players set the standard, then the standard is going to be upheld, and it's going to be a very high standard. But when your best players don't necessarily play their best, then the standard is lowered. And what I mean by that is I've heard a lot about Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau for a long time. Like they are like icons when it comes to recruiting and these five-star guys. They haven't quite set the standard as being top of the line guys as far as their play and their effort week in and week out. I feel like now, especially in the last few weeks, you've started to see those two guys have played at an elite level. And as I said, when your high end guys play to that top level, now the other guys start to come and they say, okay, I want to get to that level. I want to play like he's playing. And now you get your inside guys going and you get some more movement, some stunts, and you get these athletes playing in space. And on top of that, let's face it, I think Ohio State now sees the light at the end of the tunnel. All the pressure and all the expectations that were heaped on this team by you and me and other people maybe were a bit much, and starting with the Michigan game. But now we're like in the last, we're in this tournament where you win, you move on, you lose, you go home. We've seen their best performance here lately. When you look at what they did against Tennessee, how they played Oregon, and they know if they win two more games, they win the national championship, and they can get rid of the Michigan game, I think, from being talked about. I think those two factors are the reason why we're seeing a defensive line now that's playing at an elite level. And quite frankly, this is the level that you expect five stars to play at, right? Like you
Yeah.
expect them to play at this elite level, and it's just a shame for Ohio State fans that we haven't gotten it all season, but we're getting it now.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting, man. I think they're playing great. I think they have a really big advantage their defensive line against Texas' offensive line, and I think that's where the game could be won or lost. As far as Texas is concerned, I've just constantly find myself wondering, all right, where is this team's next level? Like, where is their willingness to go for the jugular? You know what I mean? Like for whatever reason, this team will get out on you and they'll put it in cruise control, and then they need to rally to play well at the end. If this team would just put together 60 minutes, we'd be our jaws would drop. But for whatever
Yeah.
reason, we just never get that. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think some of that it has to do with coaching, and here's what I mean by this. On defense, and I know you can on offense, I can tell how aggressive we're going to be by the play calls that come into the game. Like if I'm on defense and we're sending in cover two, I'm like, what are we doing? But if we're coming in with single high, man pressure, zone pressure, I can tell that we're trying to be super aggressive. But the same thing goes for offense. When Sark gets a team down 14 nothing, like, okay, let's continue to be aggressive and push the football. And I'm not saying we got to throw bombs every play, but
Yeah.
let's call plays where we're trying to get chunk yardage. And I think the tone has to be set with the play caller, and the tone has to be set with the execution. Because we give Ohio State a lot of credit by saying, man, if they play their best, nobody can beat them. Greg, I think the team that can possibly give them a run, if they play their best, is Texas. I think when you look at where they can, how they can match up, you look at Texas's defense, you look at Quinn Ewers, you look at the offense. If Bond and Wingo and those guys can make some plays on offense, they can run the football. Like Texas offensive line is it's no slouch. Like I honestly think that if Ohio State doesn't quite play to a 10, let's say they play to an 8.5, and Texas plays to a 10, I think Texas can no doubt about it win this game. And I think it just goes to show you how styles make fights. Because I think Texas is the one team that if Ohio State isn't quite on, it's the one team that's left that can really beat Ohio State. I don't know if Notre Dame can do it. I don't know if Penn State can do it, but I do think Texas at their best can play Ohio State and beat them if Ohio State is just a little off.
Certainly feels that way. What do you make of Quinn Ewers' performance in the game against Arizona State? Because I came out of it thinking, all right, he played pretty good at the beginning and he played really good at the end. What happened in between? Kind of like what we just talked about with Texas. But if he can carry over what he did in the final 5 minutes, and if he can carry over that in the overtime period into the beginning of this game and play that way throughout, I think they can win the game. I think it'll be tough, but I think they can win the game. So what do you make of where he's at right now?
I think he's got to be aggressive, and he's got to make aggressive throws. I've seen him. I don't know what it is with him. Like he floats the ball a lot. Like what's going on with him? Like floating the ball and these touch throws. Like, there's several throws that I can go back and point to where you got to put your back from the ground and you got to throw that thing with a little less trajectory and you got to rip it in there and he doesn't seem to want to do it. But if you go back in overtime, like when he makes that throw on the fourth down, like that ball was thrown with the perfect trajectory. It was thrown with the perfect amount of zip. I don't see him do that all the time. And I think if you're Sark, you have to ask the same questions that we're asking right now. How can I get my quarterback, not only my team, but my quarterback to play with a little bit more aggressiveness? Um, I think that's the word for Texas. Be aggressive. Like it's almost like in that movie Jumanji, when The Rock and Kevin Hart are kind of in the forest and they put their hands in like be aggressive, be aggressive. Like that needs to be the mantra of the Texas Longhorns. Be aggressive from play calling to, and that's offensive and defensive, to how the quarterback throws the football, to if you get Ohio State down 7-10 nothing, man, go for 17, go for 24. You have to be aggressive. And I think the team will feed off of that based on the play calling.
I love that you're going to new school Jumanji. Like to me, Jumanji has Robin Williams in it. But you're a company guy. I get it. I don't even know if that's part of the Disney family, but it might be. I don't know.
It might not be. Who knows?
I don't know about The Rock and Kevin Hart, but I know that Robin Williams is in Jumanji. That's for sure. Well, when we move over to the other side of the bracket, first of all, before we move on, do you have a pick in the Cotton Bowl? Are you giving that
Not just yet. I'm still looking.
waffling?
We've seen two really good Ohio State performances based on this history of the season. How sure are we that we're gonna get a third? I don't know that just yet.
I think it's fair. Moving over to the other side of the bracket, Notre Dame and Penn State. We'll start with Penn State. Penn State's a run game, and their stretch zone run game, off tackle run, perimeter run. You're a D lineman. Like I look at Notre Dame's defensive front, and they got a lot of athleticism, but they are a little lighter than they've been in the past, especially with a couple of injuries that they've sustained, most notably Riley Mills. So when you look at that run game that Penn State's likely going to attack them with, how do you defend that if you're an undersized and athletic group?
It's really easy. It's penetration, it's movement. And I go back to when we played in Tampa. Like I was the heaviest guy in Tampa on our defensive line. Like one year, I was 295. Sapp was 285. Simeon Rice was 240, 50 pounds. We had our left end who was 255 maybe. And everything we did was about quickness and about get off. And anytime we faced a zone based team, like we licked our chops. And here's why. Because at some point, when you're running zone, the offensive line has to go sideways a little bit. Like they can't just come off, they got to go a little sideways. And when they're going sideways, you go north and south. You go vertical. And if you want to funnel the ball, then you take that in. Abdul Carter, if he's going to play on the outside, you take one step upfield, you come underneath that tackle, and you get in the backfield. Penetration kills all zone plays. Okay. Now, you don't want to do it on third and long because you want those guys rushing the passer. But if I'm Notre Dame and I'm Marcus Freeman, it's going to be about movement. It's going to be about how can I put a knife in this zone scheme from the word go. Because if they can do that, if they can take away Allen and Singleton, and I get it, Tyler Warren is great. Will probably be the first tight end picked, either him or the kid from Michigan, or maybe Mason Taylor from LSU or whoever. But I still I would favor Notre Dame. If you told me that Penn State doesn't have a back or doesn't have a running game that goes over 100 yards, I'm putting a ton of money on Notre Dame, because that means Drew Aller and Tyler Warren are going to have a historic day like they had against USC, and I just don't know if they can have that type of day against this defense.
What about this Penn State offensive line? It does feel like sometimes they struggle against a really disruptive pass rushing group. Feels like Aller, even against Boise, I mean, he got hit a lot. They got hit.
Yeah.
They got overloaded. The movement hurt them. Extra guys hurt them. How do you get that sorted out against a Notre Dame group that's probably going to sit there and say, all right, we'll play man across the board, like, and we're going to bring guys at you, and you're going to have to get the ball out and beat us in man to man. Like, good luck. So how do you anticipate that kind of shaking itself out?
Well, to me, that's why the run game is going to be so important, because when you have an offensive line that doesn't want to go big on big, meaning one-on-one blocking, then play action is their friend, because now you got to sell the run, make those D linemen play run. Oh, now it's passed and I can rush the passer. And so if they can run the football and play action pass, to me, that's what helped this offensive line out. That's why if the game is played, if this game is played in third and eight, or excuse me, second and eight plus, third and six, third and seven plus, big advantage to Notre Dame because of their athleticism, because of their quickness, because of their ability on the outside. Even without Benjamin Morrison, they can still lock you up and play man-to-man coverage. I think they're gonna take the challenge of saying, okay, Warren, I get it. You're big. You're 6'5", Gronk-like, whatever. We're going to keep a safety over the top of you. I'm not going to let you beat me. We'll lock the wide receivers down. And we'll take our chances at rushing the passer and getting after the quarterback. So the run game is going to be so important for Penn State. And to be honest with you, if you think about Penn State, like they don't really get a ton from their wide receivers. Like if Penn State had a better wide receiver group, I might pick them to win a national championship because they have everything else.
All right, what about the other side of the ball? I think people looking at Notre Dame's offense and Riley Leonard and the fact that he didn't go over 100 yards passing, the fact that they did not have more than 250 yards total offensively against Georgia, and people are thinking I don't think if it gets be a track meet, they can't win it. I don't know if that's the case. I just think they will adjust their plan based on what you need to win, because I think there were plays there. They just chose not to try them because they knew their defense was pitching a shutout against Georgia. So how capable is this Notre Dame offense in the event in which they got to score 20-25 to win?
Well, I think I feel a little better about Notre Dame having to do it than I do if it were Penn State. Tell me the health of Jeremiah Love. Like where are we at? I know we're creeping toward. I saw him rubbing the knee. We put a sleeve. Like if he can't, if he's not full speed, and now we got to put everything on Price. Man, they're gonna have to figure out a way to manufacture yards. Typically we know what it's going to be. It's going to be Love, Price, a little bit of Riley Leonard running the football. If you take away that, now we can create some plays, the great house and the passing game and all that. I get that. The health of Jeremiah Love will be the first thing that I would want to know. Notre Dame's offensive line is really good. Like they're tested, man. Like we can say, if we break this thing down by position groups, I may give the Penn State defensive line like 1A or one. The Notre Dame offensive line might be like 1B as far as best groups in this game. Because I go back to when they played A&M early in the season. It was a young group. They still drinking milk and wet behind the ears to where they are now. Like they're a seasoned group, McElroy, and they can flat foot open some holes. And so I think if you're Notre Dame, everything's going to stop and start, which is why this game kind of mirrors. These two teams mirror each other because you got two teams that want to be physical, that want to run the football. They're really not trying to create chunk plays down the field a ton. Um, Defenses are really good. Quarterbacks, although I think Aller is more talented than Riley Leonard, he hasn't always played that way. And so the run game and the physicality is really going to be key to this game. So, but if you're Notre Dame, again, it's the same thing that I said with Penn State. Run the football with these two backs, run some zone read or some QB bash, QB power with Riley Leonard. And if they take that away, now Riley Leonard is going to have to make some plays. Each one of these quarterbacks is going to have to make 4 or 5 big time throws down the field. And I don't mean like a screen or an out. I'm talking about a 15-yard dig, a 25-yard corner route. They're going to have to make some big throws in this game.
Yeah, I do think that it's going to be probably a game where there might be a couple explosive plays that people don't anticipate. And I could see it not necessarily becoming a track meet. Let's not get carried away. But one big throw downfield to Amari Evans, one big throw downfield to Jordan Faison, one big catch and run by the tight end, Tyler Warren, or Jeremiah Love on a screen. Like I could see one play flipping this thing and opening it up, and then the whole world becomes yours on the offensive side. Do you have a lean in this one?
I'm going to lean Notre Dame in this one. I just think when you look at the ways, and this is how I do football, whether it's college or pro. I take a team and I say, how many ways can this team beat you? And usually the team that can beat you more ways has more opportunities and more bullets in the chamber. I think based on how Notre Dame played defensively against Georgia, I think based on Notre Dame's ability to throw the football, I think based on Notre Dame's offensive line, I think based on Notre Dame's ability to run the football, I think Notre Dame can beat you that number of ways. Penn State, their defense is really good. Penn State has a good tight end. Penn State can run the football. I don't think Penn State has enough on the edges on the outside that can threaten a defense when it's Penn State is very, very similar to Georgia. Like Georgia's wide receivers were so underwhelming, it's not even funny. I don't think Penn State's are quite to their level, but they are definitely underwhelming. And so now, when your wide receivers aren't there, it limits the number of ways offensively, if I'm calling the plays, that I'm going to try to figure out a way to score points. I think Penn State's handicapped, and I think I would lean toward Notre Dame, with a small caveat on Riley Leonard. Like I like Riley Leonard. He's like a McElroy light. Super smart kid. He's way more athletic than you. But if I had to put the game on your shoulders, I would feel more comfortable than if I had to put the game on Riley Leonard's shoulders. But by no means do I want to put it on either one of your shoulders. Does that make sense?
Hey, that's really nice backhanded compliment. I appreciate that. That works. That makes sense. I let the 295 comment go earlier with you being the heaviest guy on the Buccaneers roster, but that's fine. If you want to play that game, we can play that game too. I was going to say 295 in your helmet, like just that head is 295. What about the body? I mean, come on, man. I was going to let it go, but you wanted to go there. Good stuff, man. Appreciate you. Look forward to seeing you here very soon, and we'll see you in Atlanta for the national championship.
Always looking forward to it, man. Can't wait to hear you on the call, buddy.
That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. We continue to ask all of you to like, to rate, and to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get the podcast. If you're here with us via the ESPN College Football YouTube page, hit that thumbs up button and leave us a couple questions in the comments. We really look forward to engaging with you on that platform as well. So for all of us here at Always College Football, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day, an amazing week. We'll be back on Friday to break down the college football playoff semifinal games. We will do a recap on Friday night. So lock in with us here after the game then. I might even do a Thursday night breakdown from the Orange Bowl. Might do it. We'll see. From Hard Rock Stadium. You think they'll have me do a breakdown, post-game breakdown in the booth again? I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. If not, I'll see you on Friday night. And for all of us here at Always College Football, hope you have a tremendous day. And remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.